Trump has signed an executive order that orders the AG to coordinate with state and local AGs to enforce the law and file appropriate actions, quote unquote, against teachers and schools that affirm a child's gender, uses the correct pronouns, and more. Yeah, give me the document, please. Section 1. Purpose and policy. Parents trust America's school to provide their children with a rigorous education and to instill a patriotic admiration for our incredible nation and the values with which it stands. Right. Yeah. Lately, schools indoctrinate their children, radical anti-American ideologies, innocent children compelled to adopt identities as either victims or oppressors, blah, blah. We've heard this a million times before. Imprinting anti-American, subversive, harmful, and false ideologies on our nation's children not only violates longstanding anti-discrimination policies to parental consent, Similarly, demanding acquiescence to quote-unquote white privilege or unconscious bias actually promotes racial discrimination and undermines national unity, Section 2, definitions. Defending women from gender ideology extremism. He already signed that one. Sorry to interrupt, but breaking. We're already reading the thing that's breaking. Only so many things can break at one time before your audio card stops loading new sounds. Remember audio cards? Sound cards? Whatever they were called? Okay, basically all of this bullshit at the beginning is being anti-racist is actually being racist. The only way to truly fight racism is to be racist, etc., etc. We've all blah, 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 blah. Okay. Ending indoctrination strategy. Within 90 days of the date of this order to advise the President in formulating future policy, the Secretary of Education, the Secretary of Defense, and the Secretary of Health and Human Services, in consultation with the Attorney General, shall provide an ending indoctrination strategy to the President through the Assistant to the President for Domestic Policy. Is this not the old one? No, it's not. This is from today. Ending indoctrination strategy. Here we go. The Attorney General shall coordinate with state attorneys general and local district attorneys in their efforts to enforce the law and file appropriate actions against K-12 teachers and school officials who violate the law by sexually exploiting minors. That's probably good, though their definition of sexually exploiting minors is when you're woke around them or whatever. Unlawfully practicing medicine by offering diagnoses and treatment without the requisite license. So this means if a teacher says something like, you might be gender nonconforming, that's you being a doctor without a license. Or otherwise unlawfully facilitating the social transition of a minor student. I like how in the first two definitions here, they're like, don't engage in sexual abuse and don't pretend to be a doctor. And then for the third one, they have to drop the euphemism because they want to target the behavior really specifically. Like, they don't say anything along the lines of like, you know, or engaging in sexual abuse by denying the identity of da-da-da. They have to just flat out say, also it's illegal to call them the right pronouns or whatever. The Assistant to the President for Domestic Policy shall regularly convene the heads of the agencies tasked with submitting the ending indoctrination strategy under subsection A of this section to confer regarding their findings, areas for additional investigation, blah, 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 blah. 1776 Commission. Okay, so is the only like actionable legal threat within this document that one right there, because the rest of this looks like the standard in doing with the definitions we've already established. We believe this and we're going to do this and blah, 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 you know? Not the same as like the very specific language there. The 1776 Commission shall facilitate the development and implementation of a presidential 1776 award to recognize student knowledge of the American founding, including knowledge about the founders, the Declaration of Independence, the Constitutional Convention, and the great soldiers and battles of the American Revolutionary War. Or in other words, once a year, we will invite one student to the White House so they'll read an essay out loud to the American public about how George Washington had no choice but to have slaves, and basically the slaves were better off for it anyway. Got it. In coordination with the White House Office of Public Liaison, coordinate bi-weekly lectures regarding the 250th anniversary of American independence, grounded patriotic education, Upon request, advise executive departments and agencies regarding their efforts to ensure patriotic education. Yeah. It seems like the only really pointed measure in here was that one. Like they're burying it in the middle of all this other bullshit. Trump frame as being trans as an anti-American ideology. Definition section E is only applying to trans youth, but it's a doozy. It says that social transition is going to be a big part of the executive order, and this includes using a different name, pronouns, bathroom, and sports. This hints that the purpose of the EO will be to target this. That, to be clear, by the way, like This is completely unactionable, even in red states. They're literally talking about the federal government working with state and local to target teachers who use nicknames for students. Like, the actual practice of this, the language in the document, totally unenforceable. It's an insane overreach that'll probably get immediately challenged in court for whatever that's worth, which is intended to terrify people, you know? Yeah, much like the bathroom bans. Like, there's no way to enforce them. They're doing it just to terrify people and keep them out of public sight. I like, listen to this. Social transition means the process of adopting a gender identity or gender marker that differs from a person's sex. This person can this process can include psychological or psychiatric counseling or treatment by a school counselor or other provider. Modifying a person's name, e.g. Jane to James, or pronouns, e.g. him to her, calling a child non-binary, use of intimate facilities and accommodations such as bathrooms and locker rooms specifically designated for persons of the opposite sex, and participating in school athletic competitions or other extracurricular activities specifically designated for persons of the opposite sex. Social transition does not include chemical or surgical mutilation. Great. Remember, the president does not have the ability to write new laws. That's Congress's job. All the president can do through executive orders is change how they're enforcing existing law. There is no law, at least not to my knowledge, in the vast majority of states, don't tell me about Oklahoma, saying that it is unlawful or sexual abuse for a teacher to call a student by a name other than their legal name. That's not law. So basically what they're saying with this executive order is, if you make that law, if you play along with this and make this law, we will work with you. We are virtue signaling right now. We are here, we are planting our feet down on the ground, and we are telling you to work with us. This is a virtue signal. We are using our power as the federal government to not compel, but to essentially request legislation from all of these red states so that we may work together on this. You know? Does that make sense? Yes, but it not being legal has never stopped Trump or this new administration. Just to be clear, okay? There is at this moment no way that like FBI agents are going to be walking into your school and arresting teachers for calling somebody whatever name or pronoun, okay? That's just not their authority. They can't do that. It's a virtue signal. The Trump administration is saying, if you states pick up the slack, if your local police officers at a municipal or state level, if you start to legislate around this, we will assist you. And in all likelihood, they probably won't even, you know? There are only so many federal officers, right? You know, FBI's got other shit to deal with. But it's a way of saying, like, you know, give it a shot, basically. The goal here is to terrorize the opposition. Don't underestimate Florida. I'm not underestimating Florida. Florida's shit. So it's kind of like how a lot of Jim Crow era stuff wasn't formal de jure shit. Well, they're trying to get it formalized at a state level. That's the goal. Section 3A says it's Trump's policy to eliminate federal funding for any school that supports gender ideology. Yeah, he's already established that. Given the definitions section around social transition and other sections, this will likely mean schools that let trans kids use the bathroom, use their names, etc. That he does have authority to do, theoretically. Section 3B says it'll pull funding from any school that does not forcibly out its students, any school that quote-unquote supports the social transition of their trans students, and more. This is an unconstitutional attempt to force every trans kid in America in schools to detransition at school. Yeah, Trump loves threatening this. You can't withhold federal funding to schools for no reason. Like we covered before, the funding that is designated to schools, the federal funding that goes to them, that's written into law by Congress. That's legislation. That's budgetary stuff, you know? Trump has leeway in the enforcement of that budget, but he can't outright ignore it. There are clauses, there are conditions, there are reasons why federal funding might be cut, but the idea of him just stripping federal funding from all of these agencies, sorry, not from these agencies, from all of these schools because they're woke or whatever, absolutely not. He does not have the legal authority to do that. It's an illegal threat. I mean, he doesn't withhold that for no reason. He literally made up a reason to do that. Yeah, but that doesn't mean that reason is legitimate. The reasons why federal funding might be withheld from schools would be baked into the funding, like, that Congress signed it, you know, like, and the limits of the powers given to the president in the purview of adjusting that budget. Any reason he provides can be challenged in court. And this will get challenged in court, just like everything else, whether or not it's actually going to, stop. The goal is to terrorize people, to force trans kids back into the closet. Does this make my eggs cheaper? It might. Scientists haven't figured it out yet. Section 3C, chilling. It directs the AG and state AGs to go after teachers that allow social transition for, quote, sexually exploiting minors or, quote, practicing medicine without a license. This is likely going to be used to terrorize school districts and teachers with trans kids and the kids themselves. Yerp. Updating as fast as she can. I'll say this again, almost every EO so far has had an accompanying bill introduced by a congressman. I give it a week or two until we see one appear for this. It's very coordinated. No, I'm aware of that, but that's not really their purview here. The administration of these schools is very much like a local and state level thing, not a federal level thing. And, the bill that they would need to pass would to alter the conditions upon which Donald Trump could legally withhold funding from federal schools. All I'm saying is it's a process. There's a lot of procedural bullshit they're going to be fighting uphill over. This is perhaps his most blatantly illegal executive order of the anti-trans ones. Yeah, their hope is that school systems will comply in advance, basically, which makes sense. Yeah, it's pretty bad. Isn't it crazy how much Donald Trump can do? And we had to deal with 4 years of the Democrats going we can't do anything at all. At this point, the proceduralism doesn't feel like it matters. More perceptive, more perception of the EOs than the proceduralism. But it all feeds in. Man, the Associated Press news feed can barely keep up with everything coming out so quickly. Do y'all still think about Merrick Garland not doing his job? I do. I should move on, but it's still frustrating. No, you should think about it for the rest of your life. You should feel a deep, burning hatred forever. And I'm not kidding. Thank you for validating me. My pleasure.